Go ahead and call tonight's meeting of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission to order. This is Tuesday, January 14th, 2020. Welcome to the new year. We're glad to have you with us tonight. Our first order of business will be to call this meeting to order, which I have done, and now we will ask for our invocation and pledge of allegiance by Commissioner Cooper.
Please join me. Dear Lord, we seek your help with our affairs today. Bless this meeting with your divine intelligence and help us to make the best use of our own. We're diverse opinions here, yet we wish to mend our differences and reach agreement satisfactory to all. Please share your wisdom with us to help us do right by all concerned. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next item up for tonight will be approval of the agenda. Is our microphones on? Okay, thanks. Approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have some amendments to the agenda to be proposed?
I think I've got it for you, Tim.
Okay.
I'll try to tackle. I want to propose that we amend new business to be considered in this order. Number one, consider the rezoning of property along Pickens Bridge Road and Jays Drive.
Yes.
Number two, the side yard drainage and utility easements on cottages at Cedar Rock. Number three, the property on 3061 South Roan.
Yes.
Number four, the deviations for wireless, Verizon wireless small cell antennas. Number five, the amendment on one principal building per lot. Number six, the Randy Jones subdivision plat. And then number seven, the multiple properties along Watauga Road.
Seven multiple. Tell me about the buildings on the lot thing. What was that now? The consider amendment, is that what you're saying?
What was number?
What was number six?
Became number five. Yeah, I just moved
Okay.
Watauga to the end.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved, or so passes, and we will amend the agenda as described. Moving on, we will look at approval of minutes from our last meeting, December 10th, 2019. To approve. We have a motion to approve. A second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. And the motion approves for passing of the minutes from December 10th, 2019 meeting. We have no old business to take care of tonight, so we will move right into new business. And that new business, the first item will now be to consider the rezoning of the property along Pickens Bridge Road and Jays Drive. Hope that helps get you guys home quicker tonight. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioners, wanted to first note that this is a Washington County rezoning. This is not a rezoning for the City of Johnson City. This will not go further to the City of Johnson City Board of Commissioners. After a recommendation is made this evening, this will go to the Washington County Board of County Commissioners. Do want to note that in addition to the individuals in the audience who raised their hand, the Director of Washington County Planning, Miss Angela Charles, she's in the room as well for any questions, so we can go ahead and get started. The request here is for a rezoning on two parcels at 101 and unnumbered. Unnumbered means it just doesn't have an address. South Pickens Bridge Road. The area of consideration is highlighted here in yellow. You'll see here on the screen, I have rotated the map, so you're actually looking southeast. This is looking back towards town. This is downtown. Right down here, you can see the foot of Buffalo Mountain. So I wanted to orient you to where we are. We're on the eastern side here with Boone Lake. And this is Pickens Bend. And you'll see this bridge is Pickens Bridge, South Pickens Bridge Road. And as you extend westbound along the peninsula, The property in question is the 2.5 acre site right here, directly across from Jay's Dock Marina. So let's zoom in a little bit there. Zooming in, you will see the property here. As noted, this peninsula is relatively skinny. You'll see Jay's Dock Marina on the north side, and then where the lake bends around, you can see the waterfront properties here on the south side. So the two properties in question front directly on South Pickens Bridge Road, and then also front onto Jay's Drive. And we'll look at a different map that looks straight down on it, so you'll be able to see the road network. The property aggregate together is roughly, and I stated up here 2.5 acres only because the parcel layer identifies 2.5 acres, but there's a portion of another parcel that's not included, and I'm going to need Angie to clarify that, but I believe the actual rezoning acreage is around 2.25, but we'll look at that. Currently, the property is split zoned, so let's take a look at the zoning. I want to zoom out here pretty far just to give you an idea of the zoning on the ground and the development pattern in the area. I want to point out a couple of boundaries too. This blue boundary is the Washington-Sullivan County boundary. You'll see that it runs down the center of the lake. This green boundary is the planning boundary. The reason why you as a planning commission make a recommendation on county rezonings within the planning jurisdiction is because you are a regional planning commission. You're not a municipal planning board, you're a regional planning commission. We have a comprehensive plan that reaches out beyond the limits of our corporate limits. So that's why you have an obligation to make a recommendation on this rezoning. So what I have turned on here in terms of layers is the Washington County zoning. The city zoning is turned off. It is in this kind of pale color here and just identifies City of Johnson City. So the zoning color you see on the map is Washington County zoning. You'll see that the bulk of the area is A1, which is ag, and then everything that's in yellow, which you can see is generally subdivided, is your low-density residential, the R1. And then there is a little piece here that is B3, the general business, and that's part of the conversation today. So let's zoom in on the area. The request is to, again, rezone two parcels. The largest parcel is this one here that has frontage on both Jay's Drive and Pickens Bridge Road. So its boundaries are found here, like this. And then the second parcel is this parcel here where 101 Pickens Bridge Road is. And then there's this little extra piece right here. I believe that extra piece is being excluded, correct? Okay. So as they move forward, if and when she proposes that ordinance to her board, it would say a portion of 101. But they are including 101. So the request is to extend the B3 general business in this northerly direction to include the existing commercial building, and then also to extend in a southeasterly direction to include the remaining portion of the larger lot, all the way up to Jay's Drive. So it's split zoned right now. There's not a parcel line right here. This is a split zone piece of property. The reason why they want to do that is because they would like to develop this southern end of the piece of property with a storage building and shop, as well as parking and other maintenance purposes. Then they also propose to do a parking lot or a surface parking and storage area down here right next to Pickens Bridge Road. The existing commercial building will remain intact. In speaking with Ms. Light, they may rehab that building in the future, but this concept plan identifies what is proposed for the property. So the primary responsibility for the Regional Planning Commission is to look at this from a policy perspective. The technical aspects are to be handled by Ms. Charles and her zoning code. you all are looking at this from a policy perspective, from the comp plan perspective. And so the comp plan future land use map, that's the acronym FLUME, the future land use map, you can see here in this entire area recommends suburban residential and agricultural development. Now, I noted in your staff report why the existing Jay's Dock Marina was not identified in the future land use map. I can't speak to that. I have researched our updated comp plan. It was updated in 06-07. It doesn't indicate, there aren't any notes as to why the marina is not identified. But I will say, and I noted this in the staff report, is that that's also not unusual. Sometimes where development is existing and you have a swath of land use or recommended land use, it tends to mean that we recognize that that exists, but any future growth or development of that is not recommended. Now, that's not always the case, but sometimes if it's not going to be the case, that would be spelled out in the comp plan or noted on the future land use map.
I noticed there's a lot of boathouses built around the perimeter
There
of
are.
that shore, and it was because it's functioning primarily as almost like a residential marina, or
Well, it's both.
I'm curious.
It's both. I would really rather the applicant speak to that. I can't speak
Okay, curious.
to the operation of the marina, but yes, there is a residential component to it. So the recommendation, if you're looking at it just on the face of the future land use map, would not support expansion of that B3 area. But let's look at the area from some photographs. Let's kind of take a walk around the site. I'm not sure how many of you had an opportunity to get out there and see the property, see the area. If you didn't, then hopefully I can take care of that for you here today. I've got some photographs, but I also have two little short videos that give you an idea of what the area feels like. So this is on Pickens Bridge Road. This is looking towards the site. Here's the little commercial building at 101. And the remaining portion of the property is uphill from Pickens Bridge leading up to Jay's Drive. And you'll see there's the sign for the marina. This is the site looking straight on across Pickens Bridge Road. Again, this is 101, and the site extends up this hill here to Jay's Drive.
In that photograph, can you show like where the split zoning might occur?
It'll be easier on the next one.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. So what I do in the next photograph is I take our city car and I go up Jay's Drive like this. So I'm going to go up this road, and I'm going to stop the car right about here. And then I'm going to look right. And when I look right, this is the site behind this fence line right here. And the split zoning starts right around this tree line.
Okay.
And then extends in an angled direction like this towards that house. Now, extending or heading on up to the top of the hill, this is Jay's Drive. Off to the right here is the south and east. This is the other side of the lake. These properties here hang out over the lake, and then you'll see here this is the larger piece of property that is proposed to have the B3 extended up the hill towards Jay's Drive, and this is the marina down here on the left-hand side. Everybody have an idea? So, to give you an idea of the development character of the area, I did two quick little things here, and what I did was I came here to the end of Jay's Drive. Jay's Drive is a dead-end road, so I drove all the way to the dead end and turned around, and the camera's mounted to the dashboard, and so then just drove back down. And you'll see it gives you an example of the low-density, single-family character of the area. So I'll just fast forward just a bit. These homes over here on the right-hand side are hanging out or facing southeast over the lake. And then these over here are facing over Pickens Bridge Road. Sweet little pup. And then this is the property here on the left-hand side. So I stopped the vehicle right here looking towards the subject site. And then the next one is extending or starting on Jay's Drive and going down the hill. Here's the property here on the left. This is the larger tract up here. and then we just go down the hill, and I'll zoom in, or I'll jump a little bit here. We cross the street and then loop around. Those are the homes that you spoke of that normally are floating when the lake is at normal pool.
There's a lake.
It will be back to normal pool one day. Now, I want to stop here because I've had several conversations with Ms. Light and understand that she has existing storage and some surface parking behind this fence right here. But you can see that there is a pretty significant change in elevation right here due to you can see the red clay right there. And so there is a change in elevation or topography here. We recognize the expense or the cost involved in balancing this property. There's going to be tremendous expense involved with balancing this site, addressing that hill. I can't speak for Ms. Light on on the specifics of how she hopes to develop her property, but what she indicated is that the best thing for her at this time is to develop using the topography as it sits today. So that's why the request is to extend the zoning up the hill and then place the storage building and the shop on the hill, and then this would possibly be redeveloped in the future. So I only note that because of the next couple of slides. So then you stop here, and this is looking towards the peninsula. The recommendation from staff, based on the future land use map and based on the development characteristics in the area, is to support the rezoning of 101, the portion of 101, but to not support the rezoning of the uphill portion or of the split zone site. And the main reason why is, number one, you see the future land use map does not support that from a policy perspective, but number two, staff believes that this will have a negative impact on the character of development in the area, on the view shed, and on the residential aspect of Jay's Drive. That's our formal recommendation. From a kind of a side note, what we would hope and recommend, it's not a formal recommendation because this is ultimately Ms. Charles' ordinance, not ours. Based on the R1 zoning, it requires an 80-foot lot width and a minimum area of 15,000 square feet. Based on just simple geometry, that area right there would support the creation of 3 residential lots. That's an option. That's something she could do if she chose to do that, and then redevelop the southern portion as well as 101. We recognize the difficulties in doing that because of the change in topography. But based on the future land use map and based on the character of development in the area, this is staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Preston, the demarcation between the two zonings on that one piece of property, how does that coincide with that clay bank?
That's where the business is.
Oh, the clay bank is down
Yeah.
roughly along this line right here.
But it's not zoned. It looks like.
I'm kind of confused on this also. So 101 is currently acting as a business though, correct?
It is,
But it's not zoned as a business.
correct. It would be considered non-conforming. I can't speak to when that business was opened. Ms. Light could do that, or Ms. Charles, but they recognize that it's a non-conforming situation, and so this is a benefit to go ahead and zone that up appropriately.
Miss Light is a property owner?
Is the applicant.
Applicant.
The technical property owner is the McCracken Property Trust, and so she is petitioning on their behalf.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation.
That's good.
It's beyond just the usual, what do we do with this way or the other? Y'all have gone above and beyond to help find a solution for the people that to be good for everyone. So I'm sure that they should be very appreciative for the work you put into that. That was very nice. Thank you.
So what's
All right, do we have any, let's go ahead and have folks come before us, if we don't mind, open up the public portion of
what
the
is
hearing.
split zone?
So if anybody here would like
Number is
to speak for or against this rezoning request, we'd love to hear from you at this point.
Preston, what is the lot number of the existing split zone lot? It's not 10, like one is 101.
Sorry, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
No, it is unnumbered.
It's unnumbered.
It's
Okay.
unnumbered. It's not addressed because the parcel itself doesn't have a building on it that
Okay,
carry an address.
that's what was throwing me off.
If you
Thanks.
wouldn't mind giving us your name and address, please.
My name is Shannon Gray. My address is 400 Millwood Drive. However, I also own the two empty lots that are on Jay's Drive. So that lovely view that you saw as he stopped his car and looked to the left, that's where my property is, on the other side of the road.
Okay.
So I'm adjacent to that. So I would prefer this not be zoned as business. It's a very narrow road. It's a sweet little area where you do see pups and kids, and it's a low residential area, and I would like it to stay that way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was short and sweet. Good
That's-
job.
I do my best.
Is there anybody else here that would like to speak for or against this rezoning request? All right, I'd be glad to see you.
Hello, my name's Nick Oakes. I live at 137 Jays Drive, and I'll keep it short also. There was in the past, an attempt to actually change the zoning to a business zoning from R1 residential. And prior to that, the way the lot was being used was actually sort of like a jet ski graveyard, if you would. It was kind of overgrown. It was just kind of an eyesore, and I'd just rather not see that kind of in our area. And I understand what they're wanting to do, and but my vote's going to be no. So.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your time and being here. Yes, ma'am. If you beat the others to the podium, it's yours.
I'm Cindy
Last name and address, please.
Light. I'm the petitioner.
Okay, fantastic.
And I think I'll start by addressing his comment. I totally agree with him. It was a jet ski junkyard, and it's horrible. But once I got in the position I'm in, that's why it's not there anymore. I got rid of all that. There was the gentleman that used to occupy it had a old tractor trailer that fronted the road that he had stored parts in, and basically moved his business and left everything. So anyway, all that's just been cleaned up in the last year. So the last thing I want is that back again. Trust me, that was a lot of trouble to get rid of. But, you know, the reason I want to do this is I'm already starting to reinvest in the marina for growth. Before the lake went down, parking was an issue. Now, right now, I'm by next spring, I'm going to be adding some slips. And with the current situation, you know, it's not an issue, parking, but in a couple of years, it's going to be. And in the past, there would be people that would be parked all along Pickens Bridge Road to come to the marina, which is very dangerous. And to me, that's an eyesore, too. And I need additional parking for them to go to. So that was my initial reason for doing this, as well as that building has been there since I was a child. I remember going and buying ice cream there. And it's old, and yes, it needs to go at some point. And if we could get, my plan is to get rid of that building eventually, or possibly replace it, but at least by putting this other building up on the hill, that gives us a place to possibly store boats, clean boats, repair boats. It looks better, it generates more revenue for the business to where I can do more improvements. And I had argued with Preston about putting, splitting this and putting homes across the top. Now, I said, it's got a pretty view up there, but if you've got a parking lot and another building down there in front of you, nobody wants to put their home up there and look down at that. And okay, you put a privacy fence up, but then where's your view? The people across the street on the opposite side of Jay's Drive, their view is all of the lake. And where there aren't homes, it'd be very difficult to even build, I would think. I don't really know that because of all the rock, but I'm sure it can be done. It always can be done if you've got enough money and willing to invest in it. But, as I look at all the plans that I've got in my head right now, which are way more than what I'll be able to do, I've got to have the space to do it. I can't add slips and not have places for people to park. And I've got a growing demand for storage and boat repair and cleaning. And, maybe one day, as Preston and I talked about, maybe even dry storage involving, forklifts and whatever. That wouldn't be on that property. But, this is all in my head of ideas I have for growth for the marina. And again, if I can't put a parking lot at least over there, then my hands are tied, and I don't know how I can invest further, but I want to.
We appreciate you letting us know. Thank you for coming.
You let ask questions. Can I ask the petitioner questions?
Go ahead.
Ms. Light, can I ask you a few questions real quick?
You can come to the podium for us.
So would you say, and I think I've heard it from Mr. Oakes as well, the unnamed property has been acting as a B3 even though it's been split zoned, is that correct? As a marine graveyard, so to speak?
It did for years. Yes, sir.
And I don't know if this is completely relevant, or is this property in any way attached to the marina property in terms of the trust?
Yes, it would be. I think that's correct. I think it's all in the trust. I'd have to confirm that to be sure.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you.
My name is Terry Curvin. I live at 112 Jays Drive. So as soon as you come up and you round that curve, we're on the south side. So we're kind of catty corner to that area. Our concern is that the noise that might be generated, she mentioned that people would be doing maintenance on boats, marine, or jet skis or whatever. That would be a concern, that there would be that additional noise. Weekends, it's my time off, would like to be able to relax and not have to listen to that. Plus, it would be a distraction to the sight line that we do have. I do walk my dog down that street, and it is nice to be able to see out. If there were residents placed there, she said that because of, even if you put a privacy fence, because it is elevated, I believe with a privacy fence, you'd still be able to look out and get the view of the lake, so I don't think residents would have hindrance to the lake. So it would be my request not to allow the rezoning to take place, just because of the noise factor. And also, if they are doing maintenance, the smell factor from diesel or whatever that they're using on the boats, jet skis, that would also drift over into our home. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Do we have anybody else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Okay, Ms. Charles, thank you. It's good to see you. Welcome back.
Sir,
Been a while.
thank you. It's good to see you all too, and welcome to new commissioners. So thank you for your time. I want to thank Preston for his presentation. I think he definitely put a lot of research into it. I wanted to provide just a couple of quick notes, one being the property that is addressed as 101 on the corner. It has been used as commercial. I've talked with many people. I don't know why it's not zoned commercial today. I can't speak to that, but it is an existing non-conforming use. And multiple people have commented that back when they were young, it used to be a store. So it has been acting as a business, just to answer that question. The other information I wanted to give you was, since the request was filed with the county, we have done the processing, the mailing of notifications and such. And in that process, we've received feedback from two of the people that were notified. One is the property owner at 141 Jay's Drive, who called requesting information. If you wrap around Jay's Drive there, that would actually be just south of what you can see on the map. So we've provided that information to them. There was no further communication on either if they were opposed or in favor. They just requested information. The other one, the property owner of 138 Jay's Drive, last name of McHugh, called to advise that they live out of the area and could not be at the meeting tonight, but asked that I pass along opposition on their behalf to you. So I wanted to make sure that that was on the record.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you.
Anything else we
Appreciate
should
it.
know?
No, just here if you have questions.
Appreciate you. Yes, sir.
On B3, Ms. Charles, is there any type of required buffer by the county?
Yes, sir. There is a buffer that's required if you are adjacent to an land use that's not as intensive. So in this instance where you have single family adjoining, you would have that landscape buffer of 20 feet in width.
With your experience in the city in the past, would that be what we would call level 2 or type 2 buffer?
It would, yes, it would definitely be more than the type 1. 2 or 3. It would probably be a 3.
It might be a 3 because.
Like 3? Okay.
Yes, sir.
And And as far as across the street that occupies currently Jay's Marina, that's a B3 zone as well,
Yes,
is that
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
All
ma'am.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all for being here. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak for or against this rezoning request? Okay, thank you all for coming. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment section and open up for deliberation of the commission and asking staff questions.
Just one like Preston. And I should have probably asked Angie, I'll address this to you as well. Is there any type of time limit that for a non-conforming use that it becomes conforming? Like if it's been going on for 50 years and it's been a non-conforming use for 50 years, is it kind of grandfathered into a conforming use?
No. Now, I can't speak to specifics for Washington County ordinances, but typically, well, for Johnson City and then also typically even where I was previously located, the courts have said that a nonconformity doesn't ever become legal.
Okay.
It has to be made legal.
So it's not like common law.
Right.
And in fact, if the building were removed to a certain extent, would you be able to put another business in that was non-conforming or no? Does the grandfather no longer apply?
It depends on the non-conforming ordinances in Washington County zoning ordinance. Different, generally, if you purposefully remove it, then no. If it's removed by some act of God, maybe.
Percentages.
But it depends on how her ordinance is written.
Right. Thank you.
Preston, on the opposite side from the property we're discussing, this red strip, is that effectively unusable property that's zone B3 also because it's so narrow, or is it just misrepresented on the image?
Now, I'm not sure why the zoning map cuts it off like that. Ms. Charles noted that the rest of the marina is B3, so I think that's a map error. I don't think that's an actual.
It's kind of like a gravel parking lot. That kind of reminds me of the gravel parking lot for access to these homes.
Here's the gravel parking lot right here. That was where I turned around in the video.
Okay.
There's a short little gravel parking lot right there. Now, I will note, though, that oh, I don't have it. Let me see if it's in, okay. I drove down this driveway right here, and she has angled parking, Miss Light, pardon me, has surface parking right here that is angled and striped. And this is an upper lot, and then this is a lower lot right here. And then this extends back to a single-lane driveway that allows access to more of the lake homes, the floating lake homes that extend down the peninsula. But there are two surface lots, one lower lot right here and one upper lot. Now, only she could speak to, the levels of capacity and future use of those and all that, but she does have those two surface lots. She did indicate in our phone call that, and as she noted in the meeting, that probably fills up pretty quickly on a Saturday morning, and then people line the road, and so that's what is precipitating the need for additional parking across the street.
Question just for my reference, the three homeowners that spoke, can you put that map back up and sort of show me where those three lots are?
Sure, I would need to ask them. Could I get numbers in my ears of addresses along Jay's Drive?
Yeah, 137.
137 is right here.
Okay.
112 is right here, catty corner across the street.
Okay.
And then what was the other one?
There's a third one.
Mine, it's not an address, but it's going to be.
Oh, it was
look
this-
at 120, it's going to be the two lots just right across from that red line. So those two larger lots.
Oh, these right here? Gotcha. So 137, this vacant lot. Oh, that was what she said, right where I stopped the vehicle in the video. And then 112, which I believe is the green wooden house.
And there was a fourth that couldn't be here.
It was 138.
McCune.
And
John McCune
41.
was 138.
So Preston, to clarify, the request is to rezone from R1 to B3, the entire parcel outlined in red.
Plus.
Correct. You see the red arrows pointing in the direction of where it would bleed?
Right.
So it would head in this direction, but not include this quarter-acre piece.
Okay, so the
It-
current red is currently B3.
It is
Which
currently
is why
B3.
it's permissible to park cars and.
Correct.
Okay, those types of.
Correct.
Okay, so there's this is a new parcel. This is a separate parcel on the south end.
It's actually
No,
split
this
zone.
is
The
one
whole
parcel.
parcel is split zoned right now.
This is
Okay, I'm sorry,
one
that's-
split zone
just saying-
parcel.
So that makes sense.
No, that's okay. This is one split zone. Yeah, you would think naturally there was a parcel line right here, but there's not. This is what's called open field. And so this is the B3, and it is zoned B3. And then the proposal is to extend this red color up to this line.
Northward and northeast.
And then
north.
to extend it up to this point right here.
Is the request have to be in whole? Meaning, could you ignore the split zone and go ahead and maybe look at the parcel 101?
So that's staff's recommendation. Staff's recommendation is to support a portion of 101, meaning excluding this piece right here, but a portion of 101 that is currently adjacent to the B3, and to not correct the split zoning at this time.
All right, thank you.
And you showed some ways to heal or improve that.
Right.
Yeah. And you could even, if you drew those property lines, you could pull that split zone southeast a little bit as well.
Correct, right, yeah,
And then deal with the elevation change.
like that.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
Any further questions for staff? This is split zones, we typically hate and abhor split zones and like to fix them wherever we can, but this is a unique situation in dealing in such a low-density residential area where we would extend that. So I'll open up for motions.
I would.
Anyone?
Well, I'm not really willing to make a motion only because if the properties are joined in a trust, meaning the marina side and that side, I don't know that we have enough information to make a motion.
Now, we're in the land use business.
But we are in the land use business.
We
but-
are, and it's
So why, whether it's in the trust or not, how does that have an impact on us?
Us could own land in any direction or way.
To me, it's just, I agree with what you're saying, and I'm going to just back off a little bit and let you guys go.
Now, I do want to mention to the folks that are here that we are a recommending body to the Washington County the commission who will be handling this. Their planning commission will be the ones who will have, Washington County commissioners will be the ones who will decide this issue, not us. We are a recommending body.
Correct.
So just so you understand what our role is here, regardless of what we do tonight, it's going to go to Washington County, and they will just simply consider what we've told them. And that's how that works.
And I believe under state law, it doesn't, it's no different for the county. There would be another public hearing at Washington
Exactly.
County. Right, so there will be another public hearing opportunity in front of the BOCC. And then, but if I could, I don't want to put words in Commissioner Pavlich's mouth, but allow me to maybe just clarify based on what I've heard. Ms. Charles would not have submitted this to us unless Ms. Light was an authorized applicant. And so one has to be, whether she's somehow involved with the trust, she does have to be an authorized applicant. So-
Okay, that was my concern.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying for me, sir.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I understood.
All right. Pardon our jovial nature, we don't consider this lightly. This is important, and we're glad you're here and you spent your time with us. We actually really do want to get this right, and this is a tough decision, as you can see. We're going to grapple with it. We're not going to force a quick decision. There are things to consider. Like I said, we do not like split zoning. We have to go by what's called a land use plan. And here they called it the FLUME, the Future Land Use Map in the county. And that guides how we want to see properties developed. And typically, a zoning request needs to be in conformity with what we see the future land use is drawn out to be. That helps guide our decisions so that they're not capricious. We're also charged to take care, to look at the current use, and we are asked questions like, is this land use in character with what's going on around it? And is it in character with the development that's taking place? So that's what we're all grappling with quietly in our minds, just sort of looking at those thoughts. And we want to avoid spot zoning, and this is a place that normally a red patch on a map like this would really stand out as a red flag. This is a very unique situation where you have a marina on a lake. So, and it has been functioning as a business here for quite a while also. So I think everybody understands that. I'm just sort of reframing it and giving them time to think about it, but also letting you understand these are the types of things that we're grappling with. We're not really just joking about what's going on here.
Preston, may I ask you one other question? Just to clarify, the split zoning pretty much follows the change in topography? Is that true or false?
False.
False.
You mean where I showed you in the video where there's an abrupt change?
Yes.
No, false.
No.
It would be, that is further down here. I wish that I could make the transparency greater on that. What I can
There's
do.
a picture in our booklet that I think it makes it fairly clear where that tree line is. See, that very first picture, Stacy, I think that break is right below all those, what look like mosquitoes and stuff stored.
So is that not pretty much where the split zone is?
Okay, so
'Cause it
yes,
looks
do you
similar to
see,
me.
Commissioner, do you see the end of the driveway here?
Yes.
Through the red?
Yes.
Now, if you look at the first page of your staff report, do you see
Right.
where the end of the driveway is?
Yes.
And again, I heard it out of my ear, it's kind of where the old jet skis were. So where the old jet skis stopped is roughly where, oh, and you can see them there through
Yeah, as I say, on the
image.
picture, you can kind
Yeah.
of see the bank.
Where the old jet
Squint
skis stopped
your eyes.
is where it's split zoned.
Yeah.
Goes right there.
So
But
it
that's
is-
not the bank.
That's
She's-
not the
She's
bank.
asking about the
You're
bank.
above you're a little bit above the bank.
Right.
Probably
Okay.
Well, good.
Keep coming.
60% up.
Well, I've stored my book there
The
before.
bank
It's quite a bit.
is,
Quite a bit of slope.
that clay bank is roughly right in here. And it kind of curves,
Okay.
but it's roughly, because this is a surface lot behind that privacy fence.
I gotcha.
There is a surface lot back in there, I don't know, it looks like it's gravel. And then that bank is right about here.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess I'm not completely understanding, and maybe this is more appropriate for Ms. Light again. given that the current zoning, the split zoning of what is considered B3 contains not only the lower area as well as a portion of that which is above the bank,
Correct.
what the advantage of encompassing the land in the entire bank? What does that gain? Just more
Yeah, I would need for
more
Ms.
space?
Light to speak specifically to her requests.
But I think what she was pointing out to us was that she can move things from the lower part of the bank up to the higher part, and then use the lower part of the bank for other commercial opportunities.
You have a
such as
plat.
parking.
I think it's
Correct.
the last
You already have
page,
a
last
higher-
page in the packet.
Where the jet skis are pictured on.
See this
Well,
plat?
that whole plat used, or that whole lot used to be filled with
Ms.
marine.
Light wants to put a building kind of up on top,
Right.
if you will, up towards Jay's.
And so,
No, up towards,
Jay's, excuse me,
Drive.
towards Jay's
Drive.
yeah,
Drive.
towards Jay's Drive, you're going to have all of that. And then you'd have residential to the southwest, to the northeast, and the southeast.
And if you were to look at the split zone line from this perspective, from the map's perspective, I think I can zoom on this, maybe not. But, oh, no, I can't. The split zone starts at this corner right here and then reaches across like this.
So the request really would put the business right adjacent to the residential existing homes.
It would put this 4,000 square foot building, yes, ma'am, right beside this home, right
Okay,
here.
With B3 intensity uses taking place.
yeah.
well, the home's going to be beside B3 anyway.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not making a motion. I'm waiting for one of y'all to make a motion. I can help spark further discussion if you like.
I move that we accept the staff's recommendation to basically retain the split zoning, but also to rezone 101 to B, is it B4?
B3
B3, excuse me, B3.
in the county.
So basically, your motion is to approve staff's recommended zoning request. Correct?
Correct.
I think that's all we need to state it. It's spelled out in the documentation. So have a second.
Was it option 1 or something like that?
It was option number 2. Number 2, recommend approval of the rezoning as recommended by staff.
I'll second.
We have a second from Mr. Hickson. Do we have any further discussion, the members present?
Does the motion need to be staff's recommendation or the requester's
It does,
statement? Does
It's
it
not
matter?
hers. I mean, she's requesting all of it be rezoned.
question, do we need to specifically deny her request but make a recommended rezoning request?
Oh, I see how you're asking
That's what I
that.
would think.
No, because this is legislative, you have the authority to recommend, unless Angie says, Ms. Charles says something different from her ordinance. Okay, that,
Right.
correct as in they are okay? Okay.
Okay.
Yes, you are okay to do
I didn't want to leave her
that.
question not answered if we need.
Right, no, but that's a very good question.
Could the petitioner withdraw the request based off the proceedings right now?
She could, but like with any legislative action, she might want to have her, quote, day in court. And so this is a recommendation. This recommendation, I believe,
We're
unless.
merely making a recommendation.
Right,
That's
unless
with our-
her
right.
ordinance.
Right.
Unless the Washington County ordinance stops this in some way, which I don't think it would, this will go on to
There'll
Washington.
be a further petition to Washington County at this point, of
Right.
which our recommendation will be attached.
Right, exactly. Right.
Gotcha.
She may be able to move forward with her original request.
Sure.
And then our recommendation or your recommendation would be attached.
She could even amend her request at this point.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep. So, I have a motion and a second on the floor to accept option number 2, the recommendation from the city staff. Do we have any further discussion?
I'd just like to say I understand both parties'
Absolutely. This is tough.
desire, and I completely understand what you need for business for the marina, and I understand the homeowners as well. You have a B3 in the middle of a residential section. And I don't like it, but it is what it is, but it is needed. I'll say that for her business to grow, that property would be needed. So,
For those
I'm
things,
done.
or one contention I had, and this isn't for us to really discuss, is that certain services don't necessarily need to be performed particularly on site. Parking is an essential. Repair, overhaul, maintenance can be done in other places, but that's not for me to decide. It's not my property, but just to think about what's going on with the R1.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Abstain.
Commissioner Hickson,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
No.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Chairman Zions.
Yes. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind at the beginning, let us know you're going to abstain from the discussion at the beginning of an issue in the future. That way we know that you're abstained from the discussion. It really helps. All right. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate you. If you'll give us the tally, what do we get?
Sorry. It was 5-4, 1 against, 1 abstained.
5-4, 1 against.
Five, FOR.
Yeah,
5-1-1.
Okay. I'm like, wait a minute. Five
In favor.
in favor,
And
1
day.
against. So,
One abstain.
let me interpret that. The decision by this commission to pass on to the city, the Washington County Commission, was that we denied the request as presented, but offer an alternative which involved rezoning a portion of the area which is already functioning as B3, and deny the rezoning of the area directly on Jays Drive. So that's what just took place, in case there's any questions. I made that clear. And we appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which now is item number 2. This will be number 1. This will be consider side yard drainage and utility easements reduction from 7.5 to 5 feet for cottages at Cedar Rock Phase 2 subdivision.
Chairman, Commissioners, before you is a request to reduce the side yard setback drainage and utility easement for cottages at Cedar Rock Phase 2 from 7.5 feet to 5 feet. The zoning ordinance, this property is in the RP2 zoning district. The zoning ordinance stipulates that there is no side yard setback requirement for property in the RP districts except for the drainage and utility easements. And there is a standard 7.5 feet drainage and utility easement to the interior of all lot lines that are created in this, except the Planning Commission grants a variance to that. That is what happened in June last year when the Planning Commission reduced the side yard setback for this subdivision Phase 1, which adjoins Suffolk Road down here. You all reduced that side yard setback from 7.5 feet to 5 feet. The building code requires that houses, single-family houses, be set back 10 feet from each other. So that's why you have that 5 feet element at play. Usually, that 7.5 feet is required for utility lines extension, water, sewer, gas, and others, and for drainage improvements. In a subdivision of this nature, this is a major subdivision. Those utility lines have already been laid in particular locations. Each of the lots, this is the as-built. That is what is on the ground. If you go on the ground, that's what you're going to see. Each of these lots already has water lines provided to them. All the lines already have sewer all the lots, already have sewer lines provided to them, gas, and drainage improvement has already been taken care of. In specific areas where those drainage improvements, such as, for example, down here, this is a 15-feet wide stormwater management easement, which means there's a drainage, there's a ditch in that particular area. Those areas are clearly designated on the final in the as-built and the final subdivision plat. The easements are clearly designated and recorded. The same thing you have out here, this is a sewer line. In situations where you have a large or vacant piece of property surrounding a developed subdivision where it is not yet clear how utility lines are going to be extended into that new subdivision, generally we want to leave those 7.5 feet drainage and utility easement for use by future developers to extend lines into their lots. In this particular situation, you have Kingsport Highway. So basically, this is not going to develop past Kingsport Highway. And the only other property that can be serviced by any line from this subdivision is this tract 2 that is owned by the same developer who developed this phase 2 of the project. And those utility lines, water, sewer, are also available on Hamed Road and can be extended directly into this piece of property. You recommended a couple of months ago for this property to be rezoned to R4, and the city commission, I think it's currently going on the city commission. Right. It's currently going on the city commission for rezoning. It passed first reading already. So if this were to develop per the concept plan that was submitted, which basically the road is going to go almost the same way as this Bringsley way, those lines can be extended from Hamed Road into the property. The entire 7.5 feet is not necessary for all the lots, all these 34 lots created in this, or 24 lots created in this subdivision. There are areas where the utility lines have already been laid. Those are clearly shaded, and those easements have been recorded in the county. Staff's recommendation is that you reduce the drainage and utility easement to the interior of the lot lines, the side lot lines in this phase 2 of the subdivision from 7.5 feet to 5 feet, except in those areas where per the as-built and as recorded, the 7.5 feet is clearly needed, as shown on this plan.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
Excellent. Do we have any questions for staff? We've done this before in higher density situations where utility was not a problem, so this is not new for us. Good job. Do we have anybody here wishing to speak for or against this easement reduction request? Okay. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing on this discussion and open up for discussion on the board.
I'm wondering what's the rationale for this request? Is it to enable the builder to increase the size of the structures, or I mean, why is the reduction in the building line necessary?
I will ask the developer to speak on that.
Okay.
please.
Yeah.
My name's Tim Carter. We're the developers, and, basically, we're doing more of a starter home type development, which requires smaller lots. And, we have already pre-sold these lots. We have actually sold these lots. And we sort of had a misunderstanding, thinking that we had gotten it approved for the entire subdivision, and it was just approved for phase 1. So there was some miscommunication on my part, and we didn't correctly ask for the proper easement when we got the final done. The lots are, RP, just like Hassan said, RP3 doesn't have a setback, but, there is a 7.5 foot utility easement. We don't have any utilities going through those, so we try to serve all ours from the front. and have to, we do it from the back. But yeah, it's to keep the lot price down and to keep it more affordable for beginner homes.
Thank you very much.
I'd move to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a tie for second. Thank Commissioner Dagenhart. All right. Do we have any further discussion?
I actually do on this, just briefly.
Mr. Hickson? That's why we asked.
That's
Thank
right,
you.
that's
Finally,
right.
somebody says yes.
So Johnson City Building Code is to have a minimum of 10 feet separation between two structures,
Two single-family homes.
two
yes, sir.
single-family homes. Yet the easement is 7.5 feet per lot, which means that it's more restrictive on how close two single-family houses can be together. That's more restrictive than the easement requirements.
The easement requirement is more
gonna be
restrictive than the
15
building
feet
code. Total is
minimum.
going to be 15 feet.
Right. So there's some incongruency there. I guess that's more of a code question, but that we would have easements be wider than our homes be. Is it that we've set precedent that that the easement can be reduced to 5 feet and we're okay with that? Is that the reason that the 10-foot rule is in place on two structures, the distance being separated? I guess there's some confusion there.
The 7.5 feet drainage and utility easement requirement is really for access,
Right.
for utility trucks, if they have to go down that route. If they have to, let's say there was a line behind, let's take this case where you actually have a sewer easement here, and they have to move material or drive the utility car to service a line behind here. They've got enough room
Sure.
to get there.
No, I understand that. What I guess, sorry, not just for everyone's benefit. Do you see what I'm saying? That like the houses are allowed to be placed closer than the easements would allow?
Greater than the
Yeah.
the easement's greater than the
It's just
setback?
insert, see, it's just
There's an
insert
easement
line.
on every property line. In Johnson City, in your zoning code, there's a 7.5-foot easement on every property.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this will change what you're going to vote on it, or maybe we could.
It's
work
not,
through
no,
it.
but I
Okay.
just wanted to discuss it before we
Sure.
move on to the next item in the
But-
agenda.
There's a difference between if there's a structure present or not versus where the easement is.
Pick some division.
Yes, that's one reason, and
There's the whole idea of in nature and in kind with the types of lots that you're doing and where your setbacks are.
absolutely.
And that's the difference in setbacks.
In the ROP zoning district in particular, the zoning code permits, the ROP districts are the only districts in the zoning ordinance that will permit you to have a lot 40 feet wide. All the other districts, minimum is 50.
Okay.
Which means, and that's really the concept of a planned residential development, which means that the planning commission, the city commission, in approving that kind of a zoning district, allowing you to go that small, there is a presumption that these utilities, everything should have been laid, clearly identified, for you to have that kind of a small lot. In other areas where you're doing 50 feet, the utilities are not yet laid. You can have subdivisions where the utilities do not yet exist. So there is room in future, if you're going to lay utilities, let there be more real estate available for that. Now, the 5 feet requirement in the building code serves an entirely different purpose with respect compared to the utility easement. That is really a fire code issue. It's about how much time it can take a fire to go from one building to another building. So that's the purpose why you have that 5 feet, that 10 feet total. But for subdivision purposes, you're not looking at what happens with fire, you're looking at what happens with the infrastructure that you need to provide in a subdivision development.
Let me add something. Sure. Stood there long enough, I need to add it. In the utility business, you usually are digging a trench. It's usually 3 feet wide, probably minimal, narrower than that in some cases. It has a depth. There's a zone at which you will influence a foundation of the home and make it softer under that foundation if you're trenching too close. Tradition has it that 15 feet, if you go right down the middle and don't go much deeper than 4 feet, that will not compromise the foundation. So if you're planning to put a utility in this easement, that's where 15 comes from. Has nothing to do with fire heating up that wall over there and setting it on fire. That's a different approach. So utility companies usually ask for 15. And
Between two structures.
right, so which one will rule? And so you can get closer under the fire code, but we need 15 usually to go back in after the fact and then trench close to someone's foundation.
That sounds, have we ever looked back on something and said, okay, the utilities were ran, but now we need stormwater protection and we don't have enough
It's
space
very
to
rare
do
that we
it?
have used these standard easements, I call them, that the subdivision regs call for. They're more or less there while you're doing it, ask for it, you never know. If it's a traditional utility, a water sewer like it's been discussed, it could be a future utility we don't know anything about. But most of these utilities were when we had things in the ground. Now we've got wireless and things we didn't even conceive of when these standard utilities were written into the regs. So it's less likely to be used because we do things differently. But if you wanted to go in and put a fiber optic in, that won't take as much room as a water line or a sewer line. And you can even drill those without trenching. So there's new technologies that can let you do something in a smaller space. But traditionally, that 15-foot comes from the days, and we still trench, when you are thinking about trenching a utility.
Thank you. We're all going to leave smarter.
Thanks.
It's a great job.
I'm sorry, also, I was going to add one more thing if I could. I'm with the Water and Sewer Department, as you know, probably already know. Just a side note, 15 feet is the minimum width of easement for our utilities. We will not accept anything. We can't work anything smaller than that. I'm not aware that we've ever got an easement that was less than 15 feet. In some situations, we actually need more. And like Alan was saying, the depth is a big factor. Some of our sewer lines are up to 15 feet deep, and it's very, very difficult to work in a 15-foot area. And it's part of the subdivision regulations require that 7.5 feet on each side. And we have actually had to go back and use those in some situations. In older subdivisions where maybe we didn't foresee the need to serve a property behind it, and then it comes in, or a property owner comes in and wants to develop it, and then we say, oh, we've got the 15-foot drainage and utility easement that we can utilize to get service to them. So we have had to use them in this situation. It's, I would say master plan, I would use that loosely, but with Highway 36 existing utilities there, and the way that Mr. Carter has planned this phase, it's unnecessary for us to need those on every property line.
And we've got a couple of the hatched areas that are still being preserved, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So,
thank you.
fantastic, thank you. Any further questions for staff or discussion? We already have a motion and a second on that was the most discussion we've ever had after a second. That was. Good job. All right, please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart?
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich? Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Chairman Ziles?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, which was to consider rezoning of property at 3061 South Rhone Street from B1 to planned business.
Chairman, Planning Commissioners, before you is a request to rezone a piece of property at 3061 South Rhone Street from B1 Neighborhood Business District to PB Planned Business District. The purpose of this rezoning is to use the site. The applicant intends to use the site for a fitness center. This map shows you the area. This is the piece of property. It's already developed. It's going to use this as is. No additional improvements on site. Water is available on the side. There's parking, driveways. The building is there. No improvements are proposed on this piece of property. It's currently zone B1. It's surrounded by PB and RP3. PB to the north, that is a planned business. So this rezoning will essentially consist in extending that planned business district southward. This area that is in white, that is in Carter County. It's zone A1, and Carroll County A1 districts permit business uses. So rezoning this piece of property to the PB district will not be out of character with the existing zoning districts in the area. The RP3 zoning district, there's a single-family house on it. This is the current land use. So this is commercial, 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 and this is residential to the back. The character of the area is essentially commercial adjoining Norwood Street. From this node right down, Southwood Street, thank you, from right down to Okolona Road. All of it is, there are different commercial developments. This is looking northward. It's a car lot. If you look in southward, it's a car lot. So this entire corridor is essentially commercial. The future land use map designates this property for commercial development. So his proposed use will be in line with the future land use map. And the property will be used as it is. It will be accessed only from Southwood Street. There will be no access from the residential development at the back. Staff recommends approval because this will be compatible with the character of the area and will be in line with the future land use map.
Thank you, Asan. Do we have any questions for staff at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll open up for public comment. Do we have anybody here wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and open up for discussion or motions for this request on South Rowan Street.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second from Commissioner Pavlich. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun.
Yes.
Chairman Zions.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item on the agenda, which was 5, which will now be, I've lost count, 4. Consider design deviations for the Verizon Wireless small cell, not cancer antenna at 340 Liberty Bell Boulevard.
For the record, I did not name this technology, okay? Yes, so as we, last month, I gave a kind of overview of this new emerging technology in preparation for this. And so what we have is our very first application requesting discretionary review from the Planning Commission for a small cell wireless antenna that does not meet our ordinance. It doesn't meet our design standards as stated. And so if it doesn't meet some of our design standards, then they still have an option to come to you as kind of an appeal to say, hey, we want to make it different in these ways, and here's why, and would you give that consideration? And so that's what we have today. So this location is at 340 Liberty Bell Boulevard. It is kind of halfway down this embankment going towards this dead-end road here, Oak Lane. The one thing that was not in your reports is, so this is a 35-foot tall, 35-foot, 2-inch tall proposed pole with an antenna on top. They also have an equipment cabinet attached to the side, and then it also is 8 to 10 inches in diameter. Those three things it also has other attributes, but those three things in particular are what make it outside of our standards. And so one thing I'm missing here is a red underline should be under this on pole diameter. So I've underlined facility height. Our standard is 25 feet for this district, this area of the city. Our pole diameter is maximum 6 inches at a height of 5 foot. So if it's a tapered pole, we want the diameter to be 6 inches at a height of 5 feet. So right around eye level, no greater than 6 inches, yes.
The 25-foot in this pole at 35-foot, I saw it's on the embankment. If you looked at the grading of the road, would the top of the pole be at 25 feet from the road height, or is it 35 feet from the base? I'm kind of curious visually what's going on because there's an angled bank there.
I think that's a great point. That was not
it was not presented to us in that way by the applicant, but obviously I think that should be taken into account. But the measurement itself, 35 feet from the ground.
On that bank.
Yes.
So there's going to be a
If you were
differential
to draw
there.
a flat line from the road elevation out, it may be
Yes.
similar to a 25 foot as far as the visual impact, but that's not what's been presented to us. That's not what our design standards take into account, but that is the type of discretion that the planning commission can use.
Just kind of curious. Thank you.
Yeah. And then so that's the height. The diameter is going to be 8 to 10 inches, so it's wider. What they're proposing is already wider, and it does not include all the wireless hardware is not located internal to the pole. Some of it is being located externally in an equipment cabinet. So there's three things that would be need to be considered as exceptions to this. The Planning Commission has that authority to do that based on our ordinance. The state law, as I mentioned last month, governs kind of how these things can be handled. The letter that was handed out to you before the meeting from the applicant states that their reasoning is that there's 35 foot, yes, 35, maybe even taller power lines that exist in this area. And so that's something that the state law says, is that you can't make laws for these utilities, these small wireless facilities, that would not be applied equally to other types of utilities. And so that's kind of the case they're making. I don't know that there was, according to what we would require now, it would have to go underground. If there was going to be additional utility work out there, I mean, they could replace a pole in an accident, something like that, but.
That's apples and oranges.
Yeah, so that's the case, is that it can't be, it has to be non-discriminatory, is the language they use.
Did they give you an idea of how far off of the street that they're planning on putting this pole with the easement, what the setback is?
The applicant may be able to speak to that. This is the location right here, and then this is where the edge of the curb here.
Just one pole.
Just a single pole. And we do, and I did not have this, I just got this tonight, there is a, where did it go? Is this, yeah. This is just a scanned image, so the quality's not that good, but here you can see this black pole. This is a rendering of what it may look like from this angle. And then this is a rendering of what it would look like from Oak Lane looking up.
And that's why I was thinking about the visual impact, because it's so far down the bank.
Yeah.
What about the practicality of placing the electronics in the box inside the pole or in the ground, or hiding that?
That would be something the applicant, we've asked that they use some type of stealth design. That's what the ordinance calls for.
Exactly.
The one idea that I've heard is that you put something that looks like a public trash can, but essentially hides all this equipment inside of it, so it blends within the environment. This obviously would be a weird location for a trash can. There's no sidewalk, it's on embankment. But that's up for them to come up with those design solutions, and to minimize visual impact and visual clutter. The 8 to 10 inch on the pole, is, the antenna is even wider than that, and it exceeds that. So there's also a 6 cubic foot requirement. So may need to ask the applicant if what is in the rendering falls in line with what was proposed in the construction drawings, to make sure that they haven't expanded even further.
20 feet back there.
What is the diameter of a typical?
One other point, just kind of go back, the state law says these facilities can be this tall. They lay out these parameters, but then it also says that these are the standards that the state has adopted. However, a local government can adopt an aesthetic plan to govern the impact, the visual impact of these. And so that's what we've done. That's what our ordinance is. It serves as our aesthetic plan. And so an aesthetic plan trumps whatever is required by state law, as long as our aesthetic plan is not effectively prohibiting this utility from taking place.
And what is the state standard on height and width?
It's 50 feet in a commercial area and 40 feet in a residential area. I think as long as within 300 feet, there's a pole of similar height. There's some kind of formula
And
to it.
and a standard light pole is how tall?
25 on these, or 20? 25 on this example here, which is Liberty Bell. That's a photo from Liberty Bell. And so, another part of this is the city has gone to, great lengths to make this a very aesthetically pleasing boulevard. And there's a high standard that's been set here. And so we want to make sure that we don't do anything to harm that. The fact that we don't have any other small cell facilities in our city yet is, this is new, this is emerging. We've got an ordinance, we've been very conservative about what we want to see in our city. And so it's kind of with great care that we've kind of made these decisions, and the decision before you tonight, once it's there, it's there.
Is this the very first pole that they're going to be putting in the city, or are there others that are conforming that are just moving ahead?
This is the first one that's gotten this far. There's been discussion of other locations, and there's been issues with it meeting our design standards, and some kind of negotiation back and forth, but nothing that got carried forward by the applicant. This is the first one where they said, we want to go ahead and bring this to the planning commission. And so I think this is kind of a learning opportunity for everybody, and it's really a judgment call for y'all for enforcing our standards or taking into account some other aspects of this. One other point real quickly, and I'll wrap up. A new pole, any new pole that's being proposed in the right-of-way also must be approved by the city manager or a designee of the city manager. And so if it's not a replacement, say we're taking this pole out, we're putting a new pole in, this new pole is going to have an antenna attached to it, or we're going to attach our antenna onto an existing pole, which would be a co-location. So if it's not a co-location or a replacement, then it's a new pole, and a new pole must be approved by the city manager or his designee. So whatever decision that y'all make tonight, there's also another step that the applicant would have to go through to get that approval, just so you understand the full process.
Are you pleased with, are you happy with where the design standards are?
Oh, yeah, sorry, my recommendation. The height, I had recommended that we defer a decision on that until we see a rendering so we could see the visual impact. I think that there was a concern that if we require it to be 25 feet, then we're lowering it 10 feet, bringing it even more into the line of sight at the road elevation, as you pointed out. So we'd be bringing it down into that if we.
See, I think we need to have language like that, so that takes into account for elevation, so that everything is the standard height from that elevation, so that it's more linear instead of.
That's a good point. I think that we're kind of testing our ordinance. This is new across the country, so we are testing our ordinance, but we left this opportunity in there on purpose so that if there's a unique situation like this, they still have an opportunity to present that to you. And so on height, I do believe that, if we take a strict enforcement, but I want to know exactly what that elevation is. I still would want more information on the height and understanding the visual impact. I'm also concerned about the diameter. I think if we're gonna allow a wider than 6-inch diameter, then it needs to certainly be that we are allowing that exception to take care of internalizing the equipment. Adding the diameter plus the cabinet, I recommend denial of that.
So we have three things to think about that you brought up: height, diameter, and the external equipment. Curious, the external equipment they're proposing, would that have exposed wires? I've seen
it's
these
in a
things,
shroud.
They would have it shrouded, even
and
the
that-
wires.
That shroud would, basically like a cabinet, would have like a door that would open up, and that's where the equipment would be.
'Cause I've seen these things look awful.
So
Yeah.
is there any lease possibility for the land for the pole, like how we treat billboards?
That's where, the state law is basically taking care of that and said, your right-of-ways, these can go in your right-of-way. Only thing you can do is kind of dictate how they look.
Any further questions?
And so, I'm sure the applicant has more to add. to
Any
this.
questions? Do you have anything else you'd like for us to know, Mr. Manley?
That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Great job.
you're welcome.
It's,
Thank you, Matt.
We'll go ahead and open up for public comment. If the petitioner would like to come, we'd love to hear from you. If you'll give us your name and address, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'm Andy Loeb with Tower Source, the applicant. We're a vendor for Verizon Wireless. We do site acquisition, and we create the construction drawings. So based on that, basically, we make sure that the permitting happens, that we get all approvals in order to install the pole. On top of that, we create the drawings based on what Verizon has. From the previous questions I've heard, it is about 18 feet 10 inches from Liberty Bell Boulevard.
Okay.
Setback?
Horizontally.
Or was that the setback?
That's the setback from the road.
Sorry, from
Yeah.
the edge of pavement. Trash can, obviously would not look, correct there in the middle of the slope. And then currently, these are the designs that we are provided by Verizon Wireless. So that's the design that Verizon Wireless has approved for this site. When we first create the sites, we try to do the most similar to what's in the area. So as we saw in the picture, there was the picture in the letter, there's 2 wooden poles about 35 to 40 feet. So, I think it's the next one.
Do your image?
Either one.
Okay, I'll just bring that up.
Yeah, so basically it's the power utility poles currently there. Basically, you try to match it like for like so that it matches along with the aesthetics currently in place. For various reasons. 1, aesthetics. 2, it can sometimes be a distraction for drivers that say, oh, I'm looking, wait, what's that random black pole and with all these wooden poles? However, because of the code, we created the decorative utility pole for this area. Also, again, based on the equipment necessary for the pole, we need to not only have the wider diameter just to fit the coax lines, the amount that there is, but we also need it for the rest of the radio and equipment. We need the shroud on the outside. So that's why we are requesting both the diameter and the shroud on top of the height. The height, as you can see, on top of the height is very important, and it is also dictated by Verizon's radio frequency department. The RF engineers always would like as much height as possible. Obviously, it's not always going to work that way, but with as much height possible, further down the slope, there's several very extremely tall trees that would interfere with the frequency. So we had to go on top of the slope, and then if we lowered the height, it might take away the site completely.
So is 5G, is it basically peer-to-peer from pole to pole to pole, and then, is that how it works?
Well, so this is actually going to enhance 4G.
Okay.
With the capability to maybe eventually have modified, installed 5G later on.
And would that create more cable or less cable for the diameter of your pole?
It would be used for the same pole.
Okay.
Question. For a Verizon standard, will a 25-foot pole with internal mechanics, electronics, is it even feasible?
As in, can all the equipment in the shroud fit inside the pole? Is that what you're asking?
The standard that we currently have?
The standard,
which is a
no,
25-foot
that's why we
maximum.
that's why I'm here today.
So that standard
yeah.
is not workable?
Yeah, we need all the equipment outside because just how much is needed.
That standard not workable because of this very specific location?
No, it's how all of the Verizon Wireless enhanced 4G
So
poles.
wherever a small cell antenna might be placed, that standard won't work? Is that what I'm understanding?
For this design, with this type of decorative pole, we need to have the shroud.
Is there an alternate design that could be used?
I'll just add that what he's saying is it would require external equipment. What our code says is that if you're going to do that, it has to be stealth design. And so that's where we're putting the design solutions to the applicant to come up with that.
And stealth design means disguised somehow but not inside the pole?
Yes, some way that blends in with the environment.
And in this
Is it
case, it's mounted to
noticeable?
the side of the pole with a
Camouflage?
shroud over it.
What's that?
And in this case, it's mounted to the side of the pole with a shroud over it.
Yes.
And that's not very stealthy.
Is the height an
Exactly.
issue?
And staff's
Does our code offer recommendations or examples of stealth?
No, it doesn't get into that. Again, that's required by the applicant to come up with those design solutions.
You mentioned that this is within a realm of choices that Verizon has given to you, but does that mean that that's all of the choices that Verizon has?
No, there are other options, and some of them would be more suitable for, let's say, like the downtown area and the more historic area, but they would include light arms and acorn lighting and, there's no light poles in this area, so you don't want a random light arm where there's none.
Mm-hmm.
The 35 feet, obviously, it's not 35 feet from road level. It's something less than that.
It's
Is that
35
correct?
feet from ground level, where
So
that's,
So
visually better.
every, that pole, is it always 35 feet, no matter whether it's, below road level or another place, like if it was on the other side of the street, or right next to if it was flat? Would you have a 25-foot pole that you could put there as opposed to a 35-foot?
no, we always need it, like, that'll be a 35-foot pole if we put it on top of the slope or on the
Doesn't
bottom.
matter. So you're not worried, you're not trying to get 25 feet above ground level like our regulations say. That's your pole,
35 feet above ground
So they
level.
don't even have a 25-foot pole, is what you're saying?
Well, again, there's different types of poles. If you wanted a wooden pole, it could be several different heights, but this particular decorative pole is 35 feet.
They don't have decorative poles that are similar to this, they're just 25 feet?
I can't speak for what Verizon has. This is just the design that they gave us to run with this.
Okay, I think that we'd have to ask Verizon how they can work with this. I'm wondering if we shouldn't defer this, actually, Mr. Manley, to have further discussion with Verizon to come back and give us some further options.
We have been in contact with Verizon. They had said they wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss pole design. And so we've been back and forth on email over the holidays. I touched base with them, and they said, so when would you like to meet? I never heard back from them, and they said, how about the week, it's going to have to be the week of the 13th. And I said, okay, well, that's going to be Planning Commission week. Do you still want to stay on the agenda? They said, yes, we'd like for this, stay on the agenda, get feedback from Planning Commission.
Yep.
And then they, I think they've just
I think we should
haven't
flesh
made
it
this
out
a
a little
priority
bit.
quite yet to sit down and, but that is in
And that way,
the
because
works.
we won't be doing these each time they put up a poll, and maybe we can test out our ordinance and make sure we have realistic expectations, but I think it's time to see what their other options are. That would be my thought from the chair, that we postpone and defer this. So I would request that we have a motion for deferral.
I move.
Have a motion, yes, is there anybody else wishing to speak for or against? Okay, thank you very much for being here, we do appreciate it.
Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, we really appreciate your patience, too. Sorry you couldn't get off the list first
I
tonight.
move we defer and ask Verizon if they can give us some other technical options to consider.
Very nice. A motion for deferral from Commissioner Dagenhart. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second, Commissioner Cooper. Any discussion?
I guess I want to go back. I know we took a lot of time to come up with the design standards and everything, but I want to be comfortable that our design standards are realistic.
Absolutely.
That
We don't want to be
we're not
difficult.
asking companies to come up with something that cannot be done. And so when you propose those particular design standards and we work through that, what is the level of confidence that you have that it can be done and has been done in other locations?
Certainly the approach to this is to find that balance between protecting the visual impact on our community, making sure it's safe, and also make sure we're not shorting ourselves on potential benefits of this emerging technology. I do believe that our ordinance, we took a very conservative approach. Once one of these things is out there and it's in the community, you're basically living with it. And so we want to kind of slow walk into this. We know we're going to have, this is just starting. We're on the front end of this. There's going to be, there's two other major providers other than Verizon. They're all going to be vying for the same space. We want to make sure we don't end up with just a cluster of poles in our right-of-way that we can't turn back from. So,
Mr. Mitchell, would it be possible that members from the legislative committee or interested parties on the commission could be available whenever Verizon came to chat with about this? It'd be interesting. This is very new for everyone. I'm sure everybody would like to be educated as to what the possibilities are and what the technology is.
Cities in West Virginia.
That's the purview of the board.
Yeah, I think if anybody's interested, we'd like to be included in that. Commissioner Wild, is that something you'd be interested in learning more about? I mean, I think that's fair.
just one point, this did not come to the planning commission as an ordinance because it was going in the municipal code, not the zoning code. That's part of, staff recognizes that this is, there's still a learning curve and just getting brought up to speed on this. And so I think, taking some time to really dig in and get caught up would be helpful.
And we don't want to, we want our citizens in our city to have excellent utilities, and we don't want to be difficult to work with that way, so we want to be friendly. Please see this is just going slow. It's new for us, and we don't want to have unreasonable expectations, and it's kind of hard to know if we're doing that or not here on the front end, so let us take a little time to get some information.
It's the very first ask.
Exactly, so I think that's fair. We have a motion and a second for deferral. We have had some discussion. Do we have any further discussion? No? Go ahead and please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart?
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Chairman Ziones?
Yes.
Motion to defer is approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item on the agenda is consider amendment of Section 4.6 on one principal building per lot in Johnson City zoning ordinances.
Chairman, Planning Commissioners, before you is a staff-initiated amendment to the zoning ordinance, precisely Section 4.6 on the requirement that lots in the city have just one principal structure on each lot. As stated here, one principal building per lot. Now, I should say, this amendment really doesn't change development practice in the city. There are very many lots in the city that if you go to, you're going to find multiple buildings on individual lots. Multi-family developments, for example, if you look at this piece of property that is zone B4, it has got 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings on that single lot. If you look at, there's another one down here, 1, 2, 3. And that's another R4 zoning district. This is a B1 zoning district, business district. It's got 2 buildings on a single lot. But if you look at the low density or the districts that we commonly call single-family districts, like the R2 zoning district. An example, this is an R2 zoning district. You will see that it has one house on each lot, basically. So the way the code currently reads is only one principal building and its customary accessory buildings may be erected on any lot unless otherwise provided in this code, full stop. That's where it ends. That's how it currently reads. There is no other place in the zoning code where it expressly, now this current reading suggests that there are areas where other districts where it's clearly specified that you can do multiple buildings. But if you go through the code, you don't have that. It has generally been kind of interpreted from development practice, from density provisions, lot coverage provisions, that other districts, R3, R4, the RPs, the business districts that those will permit, and that's the way development has generally occurred. So what we're really doing here is cleaning up the language, making it very clear that only one principal building and its customary accessory buildings may be erected on any lot in the R1, R2, R2A, R2B, and R2C zoning districts. Those are your single-family districts. And then the districts that permit multi-family development, business, institutional, industrial developments, all those other districts will permit multiple buildings per lot. So this is not a change in the development character of the city, just a cleanup in the language. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Asan. Do we have any further discussion?
Are there current instances where there are more than one principal building on lots in single-family residential?
Principal building, no.
No.
There's none that I can think of. Customary accessory buildings, yes. You're permitted to have multiple customary accessory buildings, but principal
only one
buildings,
principal building.
there is none that I can
And
think
would that
of.
be anything that could be appealed, like could an exception be granted by the BZA or something?
No. Use variances are illegal in Tennessee. You can't, Walmart, for example, cannot come to your neighborhood and say, give us a variance to go build a Walmart in this neighborhood. That's prohibited. The law prohibits that. They can't do that.
What if you had an estate lot,
An estate lot.
10 acres or more, and you wanted a carriage house? For, let's just say, as
Garage apartment.
well, garage apartment or
Accessory
this is
dwelling
fun-
units.
Huh?
Accessory dwellings.
No, it would be more like, let's just say I have a 10-acre lot, and I wanted to create, as part of my long-term care plan for myself, I'd like to create a little 3 and 2 bedroom house on this lot, also to have maybe a caretaker and someone to maintain my landscaping for me.
10-acre lot, under current regulations, that's a lot of real estate that you can subdivide and put that one building on a separate lot. Under current regulations. That would be the only route that would be. If it's a principal structure, if you do it as an accessory dwelling, which means somebody can be living in there, but they'll have to maybe rely on your house for maybe cooking, they'll have to, it has to be dependent. If it's accessory, then it has to be dependent on some other structure. You can do that if it's an accessory dwelling. Now, some years ago, that discussion came up to the Planning Commission. There was significant discussion on it. Planning Commission set up a committee of about 10 persons are found in the records to craft regulations on accessory dwellings. That was all worked out, but City Commission turned it down. So that's a different discussion. What you have in front of you today, simply dealing with number of principal structures that you can have per lot.
You said principal means you can live in it? Is that what you said? It has its own?
If it's, you can live in it, you can cook in it, it's like your house.
But you're saying only one per lot?
Only one per lot. That has been the practice in the city, in a single-family neighborhood district. That is in the R1, R2A, R2, R2A, R2B, and R2C.
What if there's non-conforming properties after we consider this?
They will be grandfathered. They'll be legal non-conforming.
So if I
In
wanted
other
to
words,
build another
grandfathered.
house on my R1 land right now, can I, in Johnson City? Can I put another principal structure in?
On the one lot that your house is, no, in Johnson City you cannot.
I can't,
You cannot build another house.
but I can build another principal building?
That house being a principal building. So if that house you want to build is a principal building, just as your house is right now on that single lot. So let me take a lot here for example. Let's say this is your lot.
That's what I'm saying.
Let's say this is your lot, and you say, oh, I've got a lot of real estate behind here. I'm going to clear this and build another house on it, just as this house in the front. You cannot do that.
Can't do that now?
No, you can't.
So then what am I fixing?
We're clarifying, we're cleaning the code.
We're not changing anything
We're
in
not,
practice.
in practice, we're not, yeah.
Well, but we're allowing it on.
We're just cleaning up the
Allowing it
language.
on non-res- Okay.
As it is written right now, gives the impression that if you go to multifamily districts, take this piece of property, for example, this is the R4 medium density
You only get
residential
one
district.
principal building.
They will only have one principal building.
Okay, I got you. I thought that's what it was in the beginning, but as we started going off on these other discussions, I was starting to
Yeah.
wonder. I thought about going ahead
It'll all
and
go
putting
back to
another
what I
house
want to
up
talk
on
about
It's
later.
going to come
So
up to the public.
it's going to be the published provision.
That will be a different amendment. The amendment we're looking at today, it's something totally different.
Easy.
If I could, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, if I could add, Hassan was handling this with great care and delicacy. This is my fault. This was a concern to me when I first came on board. Hassan is exactly right. There has been a practice, and one that has not been challenged, but there has been a practice of allowing multiple buildings on lots regardless of the zoning. Now, there has been a method through the subdivision ordinance where that has been practiced, but allow me to back up for 1 second, even away from this, and address some of the development concerns that we've been talking about here since last fall. You may recall, or you may have even heard recently, that we've gone through some reorganization. We're really looking at our talent and our skill set, and we're aligning folks where they really need to be and can best serve our citizens and the development community. The other piece is that it is very important that our ordinance be predictable and be consistent. And then, in turn, staff is predictable and consistent in the application of the ordinance and in the decisions we are making. What I am not at all trying to do is create robots. We are professional planners. We are professional building inspectors and officials, et cetera, et cetera. But it is important that the application of our ordinance be clear, consistent, and predictable. And this particular provision could be challenged on both sides of this. It could be challenged allowing multiple dwellings or multiple structures, or preventing that. And so anytime we have an opportunity to provide clarity in the ordinance, we need to jump on that, and there are going to be many more of these coming down the pike. And so again, this clarifies that only
Many more
one,
clarifications or many more
clarifications.
Which is bringing me to one of my thought processes is, I wonder if it would be helpful if we just sort of put together a comprehensive sort of, Preston's ideas of how we need to change the code book and bring them all together in a packet, let everybody powwow over it and knock it out. And that way we could just once and for all get through a lot of these clarifications, because we're doing them monthly and we're peppering them in. But I wonder if and you've got some things that you're concerned about, if we can get that knocked out so we can move on to revising the land use plan. Maybe
Right,
put everybody's time into that. I mean, it'd be great to just knock it all out in like one marathon planning session or something.
It would be
From the city.
very difficult to do that in one fell
Okay.
swoop.
Well, I thought maybe like a month with the legislative plan, and everybody involved.
Right.
And sort of comprehensively, let's just get rid of this so we can move on to the big things, because we need to get our land use plan back up to date and a number of other.
That's going to happen regardless.
Okay.
Yeah, please understand that we're operating in a way where we have multiple fronts, and we're not linear, and so, or I should say consecutive. And so Matt Manley has, you may notice over the last year, he has stepped away from the Planning Commission, but now he is back. He is going to be handling many of these text amendments, stepping back into a legislative role. Some of these text amendments are also addressing customer concerns and are customer friendly. So when we are bringing them to you, there may be a reason from a customer service perspective why we are bringing it to you. We understand this concern with peppering you. We certainly don't want to do that. But
Not a complaint, just wanted
Right.
to expedite the process, actually, and help, let's get that one off the list.
I understand where you're coming from, but unfortunately, we can't treat it like a checkbox. This is policy, and so this is making sausage. And so we need to, there are areas of the code that we need to clarify, clean up. Mr. Manley and Mr. Bernard are going to work hard on that as we get into 2020. But some of these are time-sensitive and customer-oriented, so just want to provide that clarification. Sure.
Thanks for the clarification on the amendment request, and sorry to slow us down. Do we have further questions for staff? No? Okay.
To approve.
I have a motion to approve. And we have a second? Any discussion? Absolutely not. Please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart?
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Chairman Zion?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Let's move on to the Randy Jones Estate Subdivision plat request, please.
Chairman, Planning Commissioners, before you is a request to consider a final subdivision plat. This is a minor subdivision, basically splitting this piece of property at 3706 Timberlake Road into two lots. Ordinarily, those kind of minor subdivisions where no utility construction is required, there is no street construction involved, those are usually just done administratively. Staff will just review them if they meet all the zoning requirements and subdivision regulations. The different departments sign off on it. Staff will call in the Secretary of the Planning Commission to sign on the plat for recording. But by state law, we can only do that if the plat meets all the requirements. If there is anything it doesn't meet, it cannot be administratively approved. The Planning Commission has the full and final authority when it comes to matters of subdivision, whether it involves changing, amending the subdivision regulations itself, or approving a plat. Anything dealing with subdivisions, the Planning Commission is a final authority. So when we reviewed this piece of property, it's a multi-family development. It's a multi-family development on it. It's zone R3. It was annexed into the city in 1980, December 26, 1980. At the time of annexation, it was kind of under construction. It was vacant. There was a construction plan already but approved by Washington County. And then the city annexed it and zoned the property R3. This is the proposed subdivision plat. Let me step back a bit. On the lot, as it is, you see there are two buildings, this and this. And the subdivision proposes to cut those two buildings, create two lots. One building, this will have 5 units on it, and the other building, lot 2, will have 27 units on it. The subdivision regulations provide, Johnson City subdivision regulations stipulate that no final plat of land within the force and effect of an existing zoning ordinance will be approved unless it conforms with such ordinance. In other words, the subdivision, if you're creating a subdivision, you have to meet the zoning requirements. You cannot create lots that violate zoning requirements. Basically, that's what that particular section of the subdivision regulation is saying. Section 3.5.3 of the Johnson City zoning ordinance, this piece of property is in the city, says a non-conforming lot, as this one, shall not be used, conveyed, transferred, subdivided, nor have its boundaries altered in any manner except for government purposes that will compound or further increase the non-conforming characteristics of the lot. So what is happening with this subdivision is lot 1, as proposed, will only permit 5 dwelling units, will only permit 2.46 dwelling units. Lot 1 as proposed, as existing, but it's proposed to have 5 dwelling units, so that's non-compliant based on the lot size. Lot 2 will only permit 6.02 dwelling units. It is being proposed to have 27 dwelling units. That is non-compliant. In terms of density, Lot 1, the zoning ordinance in the R3 district permits 7 dwelling units per acre. Lot 1 will have 4.2 dwelling units per acre, which is okay, and Lot 2 will have 31 dwelling units per acre. That is non-compliant. So based on this, staff is recommending that this plat be denied because it doesn't meet zoning requirements for lot size and density. The property can be used as it is. It's legal non-conforming, it can remain as it is. A question came up whether a property owner has rights to divide their property. No, the act of subdivision is a privilege and not a right. If you want to subdivide property and you don't meet regulations, you cannot provide sufficient infrastructure for that subdivision, Planning Commission has the right, the powers to deny that subdivision. Staff recommends denial of this subdivision.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions for staff regarding this subdivision plat?
Could the property be requested to be rezoned that would allow him permissible use and potential subdivision?
That was actually one of the things that we considered. There is no zoning district in Johnson City that permits a density of up to 31 dwelling units per acre. The highest we have, I think the R6 is 28. So you couldn't, no rezoning would permit
So he
this.
couldn't even request a
rezoning,
rezoning and
no.
then subdivision? Okay.
We'll have to create an entirely new zone in the district.
So what's your view on how we ended up with the density that we did, given that it was annexed at R3 back in 1980? Well, how did we get to the density that we're at, the 26 units per acre?
It was already approved in Washington County at the time. The property was in Washington County.
And built, already developed.
It was under construction. The plans already approved. The year it was built in 1980, and the city annexed it December 26, 1980. That was kind of the end of the year. So the plans were already approved, and it was under construction.
At the county level?
At the county level, yes.
And did it conform with county zoning at the time?
I will expect so. I cannot speak for that.
Right.
I was not yet born, maybe.
Sure.
I don't know.
This meeting just got longer.
Oh, yeah. I can't speak to
Just
that,
curious
but
how we got to the point where we're at.
we would expect that it met zoning. You know, let's say the zoning in the county at the time might have been even R3, but the R3, as it were in the county, might have permitted that density. Or,
We hadn't thought about it yet.
and this is a possibility, I've done some research to find this. Let me go back to this area view. It is very possible that at the time that this was developed, this piece of property was larger than what it is now. There are no subdivision plats creating this lot. I've not found them. I've dug in the county, done all kinds of details. I cannot find a subdivision plat that created this lot. So it's very possible that at the time this was approved, it had enough area for whatever density was permitted in the county. And since then, just using deed, somebody has created a lot and then made it non-conforming.
Makes sense.
In records.
All right. Any further questions for staff at this point? Nope. Nope. Thank you. We'll go ahead and open up for public comment speaking for or against the subdivision plat approval. Mr. Jones, I presume?
Yes, Jeffrey Jones.
All right.
Yes.
So give us your address, please, sir.
Yes, I would just like to state that my dad, Herman Jones, built this property, and my brother, which is deceased, God rest his soul, built this property, and myself. And since finding out that it does not meet the density, that I am wishing to keep the property together, not be separated now.
So you wish to withdraw the subdivision request?
Well, I'm the administrator. I had to submit this trying to
Right.
come to a resolution to divide the property with my other sibling. But I propose that we go a different route and these two properties stay together.
Appreciate you coming to tell us that. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
That
Yes,
helps
sir.
us a lot.
And I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
My other sibling is proposing that a court order be put in place to divide this property. I wanted to see what your input is on that if a judge says this property is divided.
It's probably not my place to opine on that, but I believe staff has already talked about the discussion of subdivision being a privilege rather than a right.
So does that mean the judge would overrule it or not overrule it?
I am not going to decide on that, but I know of no case in my understanding where somebody would rule in favor of a court order that forced somebody to subdivide it. I've never heard of that actually being favorable.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So did I hear the applicant correctly that he wishes to withdraw this
No, he
request?
does
or-
not. He's been asked to present
Okay,
it
so
tonight.
he must
But he
t-
says we'll go back, and he personally would like to consider going another way.
Okay.
But anybody else here wishing to speak for or against the subdivision plat? And seeing none, we'll go ahead and withdraw, or not withdraw, but close. Sorry, it's long. We'll go ahead and close public hearing and open up for discussion or motions.
Motion to deny the request.
We have a motion to deny.
Second.
And a second from Commissioner Cooper. And if you'll please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart,
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich.
Yes. Wait, can we, it's no, right?
I'm sorry.
It's a yes to deny is the question.
I apologize. I know I am out of order, but I would ask that the board, before you wrap this up, I would ask that if this does go to court, I would ask that you please state why you are denying. I realize that the staff made a
Right.
presentation, but I would please state why you are denying.
To very explicitly state why, I'm asking, why don't we halt the calling of the board for a moment, if it's in line with the person who's made the motion. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
And the second? Yes. And let's amend the motion to include the reasoning of staff that says that this request does not meet the ordinances for our subdivision regulation, particularly in violation of density, correct? So we will cite staff reasoning in their report and agree with staff's recommendations to deny.
Specifically, the proposed plat violates density requirements in the R3 zoning district in which the property is located, and legal non-conforming lots are prohibited from being subdivided in a way that compounds existing non-conformities.
So, thank you very much, Commissioner Wild. So her motion is to deny based on staff's recommendations as written, and as she has just read out. And second? Second. Thank you very much for making sure we're clear. No, I always struggle with that because we are implying that that's exactly what our reasoning is, but it does need to be included. And please call the roll.
You don't need that repeated, do you?
I don't think so.
Vice Chairman Cooper,
Yes.
Commissioner Dagenhart.
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Wild,
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun.
Yes.
Chairman Zion.
Yes.
Motion to deny as stated is approved.
Mr. Jones, thank you for being here. We respect your property rights. This board has a great respect for personal property rights, and we want to work with you well and understand your position. I hope something can be worked out and be favorable for you to use your property as you enjoy. Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be to consider the area rezoning of multiple properties along Watauga Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, I will make this quick only because you have already considered this exact same area, these 8 properties. We are coming back before you to change the request of 6 of them. The addresses have not changed. Those remain the same as previously presented to you. Again, the city is the applicant in this rezoning. The area of consideration, just as a reminder, we are over on the east side of town. We are here at the intersection of Fairhaven, Watauga Road, and MacArthur Street. This is the intersection right here. Actually, there are two intersections. It's this little neighborhood node. You'll see here on the screen, it's behind QEP and a little further east towards the Johnson City Municipal Airport from the Pepsi plant. The request is to revise the rezoning request. Is to revise the B5 request to PB, planned business. Those properties that are requested and were originally requested for RO2 are not proposed for any change. They are remaining proposed for RO2. So let me first start with how this began. This began last fall with a conversation with a proposed developer who was looking to develop 2532 Watauga Road. That's why the arrow's first pointing to that address. We noticed that it was split zoned, and as we discussed tonight with your first case, if we have a situation of split zoning, it is our responsibility to come and try to correct that. And so we advised the developer, who was at the time not prepared to submit any development applications. This was a conversation, but during that conversation, we discovered that it was split zoned, and we said, hey, from a customer service perspective, let's handle the split zoning. And then during further analysis, we realized that we had a little commercial node, a little neighborhood scale commercial node on our hands. And so we thought, well, now's an opportunity to not only repair the split zoning, but to bring some consistency to the zoning in the area. So that's what started this with 2532. So the original recommendation is to clean up that split zoning from a split of R4 and B4 to PB, planned business. The next three are currently B4, and those are planned to just convert from B4 to PB, planned business. Now, what happened was at our first neighborhood meeting, this was back in September, our first neighborhood meeting, that property owner there at 2533 Watauga Road, that is the Casey family, those folks contacted my office and said, hey, wait a minute, what's going on with this rezoning? We live on this property and we may want to rebuild our home in the future, because originally we were proposing to have that B5, now PB. And she said, we might want to rebuild our home. And we said, okay, understand that. In order to, again, try to support the consolidation of this little neighborhood node, would you be interested in allowing a zone that would facilitate small-scale commercial development, non-residential development, but would still allow you to rebuild your single-family home? And she said, absolutely, we're all about it. So that's the RO2. The RO2 is residential office. It is a transitional zone, allows for offices, professional services, institutional uses, transitional uses typically found between residential and commercial. Then, at the October neighborhood meeting, we've had 3 neighborhood meetings on this one. At the October neighborhood meeting, these folks at 2530 Watauga Road and 102 Fairhaven, they received the letters and they came to the meeting and they said, wait a minute, we want to be a part of this. And so at that time, we decided to add 2530 and 102 Fairhaven to the request. So those are proposed from R4 to PB. And then finally, the woman that owns 2525, she did not even know that she was currently zoned B4. That's her single-family home. She inherited the property. She's not planning on going anywhere, but she liked the idea of the RO2. She liked the idea that in the future, if she ever wanted to sell, she could sell it as commercial real estate, but she could also continue operating as a single-family home without being non-conforming. Now, you may be saying, okay, all that's great and good, Preston. Why are you back with the PB? The comments that you all made about the B5 were spot on. B5 is a zone that, although legally cannot be reserved for a particular area of town, it is, in effect, used only in gray. That's another conversation that we need to have about the future of that zoning district. We will have that at a later time. But in this particular situation, we're going to go ahead and back away from the B5 and propose the PB. And in fact, having done this exercise now, I wish I had brought the PB before you in the beginning. The PB was one that I missed. This is most appropriate in this type of situation where you've got a small neighborhood scale commercial area, a little node, and that is surrounded by residential. The number of uses permitted in PB are less than the B5, but again, we mailed out letters. We had another neighborhood meeting last night, and the folks who showed up were the Caseys. They wanted to make sure that their RO2 was intact. And the gentleman that owns 102 Fairhaven, he was fine with the PB. He likes the idea that it still allows retail, restaurant, and some professional services, but knocks out some of the heavier, intensive arterial uses that the B4 and the B5 would normally allow. I also spoke to Bill Dersh, who owns this property here at 2530. He understood what the PB was, and he's excited about it. So, since all this time has passed, the application came in. So, so now the developer has caught up to this process. They submitted yesterday the plans for the Dollar General, which is proposed for 2532, the split zone site that we're trying to correct for that development. Again, some time has passed. Asan has been assigned this particular case, and so our communication to them is going to be that they just need to hang with us, and until we get through City Commission, hopefully you all will provide a positive recommendation, and then hopefully City Commission will approve the PB, and they should be off and running. So that said, staff recommends approval as requested.
Thank you very much. It's nice. I like the PB. It's excellent. Do we have any questions for staff? No, is there anybody here wishing to speak for or against the area rezoning request on Watauga Road? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment at this section and ask for any further discussion or motions being made on this rezoning request.
Move we approve.
I have a motion to approve. Commissioner Cooper, any second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Hickson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Chairman Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Degenhardt?
Yes.
Commissioner Hickson?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wild?
Yes.
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Chairman Zions?
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, moving on to other in the agenda. We had a zoning amendment for accessory structures. Have we, did you want to talk to us about that?
Just to give you kind of an introduction to this, and I will let Commissioner Pavlich throw more light. He's engaged staff in the last 1 month on a possible amendment of the zoning ordinance, which he intends to introduce dealing with accessory structures.
Don't have anything.
Okay.
Dealing with accessory structures in the code. You don't have anything in your packet on this. There's no ruling on this today. There is no language that is being proposed in front of you. This is more of to open the discussion, and then possibly as I proposed to him, the legislative committee and the land use transportation committee can then go back and work on the language if it is something that the planning commission wants to entertain. It basically has to do with this boat docks scenario. Today you were dealing with marine, the marina out there, lakefront property, not a creekfront property.
Not creekfront. That's correct.
Yeah, this has to do with lakefront property. Two scenarios. One, in the zoning code, there are accessory structures that are exempted. When you're calculating, maybe I think I put that up in the zoning ordinance. Let me get to the zoning ordinance itself.
So you do have that page. It's the accessory structures and uses.
Yes.
4.13 and 4.13.1.
We don't.
We didn't get that one. That's the page
You
we
have
didn't
it,
get.
but we don't.
Case number 7681 we have, and then
That's
this.
it?
And then we have that, yeah, that's it.
I have the zoning code pulled up here for you.
I'm sorry.
I have the-
You got that, I've already rolled out once.
I have the zoning code pulled up that should have been resolved in helping everybody to follow up.
Thank you. No. The person.
So under section 4.13, it lists accessory structures and uses. 4.13.1, it says accessory structures provided, basically is 5, or really there are about 7 that are listed, different accessory structures that are listed here. You have private residential garages and carports, buildings for storage incidental to a permitted use, private swimming pool and tennis courts, alternative energy systems, and greenhouses. That's what the code currently lists as your accessory structures. And then if you go up, no, I think it's further down. Can I have the papers I gave you, please?
Yeah. And I could probably I can condense this for us real quick.
Okay.
If you want me to? So in 4.131, as the someone just listed, all these special exemptions are unique. They're unique in terms of pools, greenhouses, solar and wind devices. What my point is to this exception, I believe docks should be excluded or counted as an exception.
Added to the list.
To add to the list.
And what they're saying by being an exception is that doesn't count towards your accessory structure.
Correct. It
You can
doesn't-
put that up and still have another accessory structure.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Because a dock, even though it's considered storage building, it's really.
No, that's a completely different situation.
Well, currently under our language,
Yeah.
a dock is counted towards an accessory structure.
No, I agree, a dock should be an exception.
And to further my point, anything that is below the 1385 watermark on Boone Lake is technically owned by the TBA. It might show you as a plat, but you can't do anything to it. And the dock itself is governed by the TBA on what you can and can't build. So as the picture that I think I did give everybody, I just kind of use this as an example. Here is a.
Is your house?
If I push a couple of people down the steps, maybe. But, as we look at this property, this is in the city, right at 5 acres.
Yeah.
And the house is almost 7,700 square feet. And obviously.
The dock is counting as an accessory structure, so they can't have another one.
Correct.
That's not right.
Is there a point when a dock becomes something more than a dock?
Somebody lives in
I
it.
mean, I've seen,
Yeah.
there's some.
Why can't it be?
Well, there's some docks
Depending on the house.
that,
Well, garage
So, again, the
apartments.
docks are governed and permitted by the TBA.
Yeah.
They're not permitted by the city.
so you're saying no matter what the character of the dock is, it shouldn't fall within our code?
That's my opinion.
I would agree with that. That was just because I grew up on a lake.
Well, in the
What you can
language
do
we
with the
just-
dock is so different.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just saying, I agree. Go ahead, please.
In the language we just approved, it caught my eye, it said accessory buildings. It was actually plural.
Yes,
So
because-
is there a restriction on having multiple buildings, or is there a total square footage restriction of the
There is-
950?
There is a total square footage restriction and a percentage restriction. I think it's.
Which
what
is
I-
my second argument.
What I've highlighted,
Yeah.
what I've
Why
highlighted
1,800
here.
Square feet.
The zoning code says no more than 2 accessory structures shall be permitted on the property.
Okay.
Private swimming pools, tennis courts, alternative energy systems, and greenhouses are exempt from this requirement. We had all those about 7 different accessory structures listed. Now, under this section, it takes out 4 or 5 of them, and so you should exempt them. And then the next sentence says, the total combined area of those buildings, those accessory structures, shall not exceed 850 square feet, or 30% of the floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is greater.
And that's silly.
So if you have 5,000 square foot house, for example, 30% will apply. 30% maximum
No,
rule.
without, you'd have to have an exception or a variance, one or the other, because you're saying that the greater would not be 850 feet, square
No,
feet.
the greater will apply. Whichever is greater will apply.
Oh, whichever is greater will apply.
So you could have 2,100 square feet on it.
It just depends on the size of the house.
Okay, I thought it was limiting at
It's also a
850.
That's what I thought.
footprint
That's
restriction, right?
That's how it's read in the past.
Square footage of the lot, there's a restriction on, as a percentage of the lot.
No, not the lot, the principal
The
structure.
percentage of the principal
So
structure.
even if you have a 10-acre
Or the
lot,
house.
if you only have a 1,000-square-foot house, the largest accessory structure, you could put 800.
850.
850.
Yeah.
So, to me, there's a couple things wrong with this, and we've hit two of them. The dock should not count as an accessory structure,
It should be
in
an
my
exemption.
opinion.
It's a deck.
It's a deck.
Yeah.
And you're not really storing anything. And then the second thing is the size of the structure. Well, that cleared up, because I was under the impression you were telling me they could only go up to 850 square feet.
It's
The greater, it's the greater of, excuse me.
Greater. Whichever is greater.
Structures, dock and dock-associated structures should just be excluded from it.
So basically what my request to, I don't know why it needs to go to a legislative committee, but if we have to go that route, to put the language in that a dock should be listed in 4.13.1 as an exception to the minimum square footage, to the square footage of the principal
You
structure.
want to make a motion?
They're telling me I can't. I don't know. Because it has to go on the agenda, is that why?
Needs to be announced in the agenda? Yeah. It has it, right. Great.
Yeah, this being a change in an ordinance, it is important that we have it in there. The public should know.
Yeah.
This is something that's going to affect the entire city, it's not just
It
applicable.
affects less than 0.5%
Now,
of lakefront homes in the city of
That's
Jackson.
true, but if we should follow always.
The zoning ordinance is applicable to the entire city, not just to one particular
But it doesn't
property
mean we
owner.
need to spend 6 months on it. I'm curious if there's any other corner cases like this that we need to consider while we're addressing that. Can you think of any?
There are a couple of things that are
Exceptions, is that what-
Oh, I have a few.
exemption.
I still think we need, and I think the legislative committee can look at this. We need to really, because the lots are starting to get larger and larger in Johnson City. Whether it's an acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, somewhere on Carroll Creek, what is it, Duncan's Retreat? They're building 3 to 5 acre lots. Yeah, so at some point, these accessory structures, all of the accessory structures need to be looked at. And I think it should go to what Commissioner Hickson is saying. It should be lot sensitive because of the density of the lot, as well as the principal dwelling.
I've seen a place where somebody did that once, and then they wanted their accessory building to be bigger than their principal building because they wanted to put a greenhouse in an inappropriately zoned place. Do you remember that case that we had?
Well,
and we denied it because their accessory structure was going to be bigger than their principal structure, and we used this to say you can't do that, and it was.
But
wonky.
here's an example from March 27th, 2013, when I sat on the BZA, and this was a couple who had a 17-acre estate in the city of Johnson City on the backside of Buffalo Mountain, and they wanted to build basically a studio. And it had running water and everything, which would have been a secondary residence.
Principal residence.
Right. But based on the size of the acreage, it made perfect sense.
Why don't we sit down on a legislative committee and look at it and see? Because, I mean, I think what you're saying makes sense. There are places where people want people to use their property the way they want to, as long as it's in line. We can be a little clearer on it. Think about it. It's reasonable to look at it.
Mr. Chair, if I could add, Commissioner Pavlich's comments are right on the money. This conversation, in addition to a larger accessory structure conversation, is exactly the kind of customer-friendly, property-friendly conversation that we've already begun at the staff level, in fact, many months ago, and we put an accessory structure text amendment on hold to gather additional information, and we just have yet to bring it back to you. I think now is a great time to add this piece to that accessory structure conversation. Part of what I'd like to add is the comment from Commissioner Pavlich is exactly right about Duncan's Retreat, but then if you remember from the easement reduction that you did at Cottages, we're also getting smaller lots. So we're going in both directions, which is a great thing to be happening. So we need to be responsive to that. And so how you're responsive to that is you have these policy discussions and you revise the ordinance accordingly, and then by revising the ordinance, you get it codified. Now you have predictability. Now you have consistency. And so, so part of the conversation in that other accessory structure text amendment is about accessory structures in older subdivisions that predate the application of the 7.5-foot easement that you all had some extensive conversation on. There are older neighborhoods, such as the Tree Streets,
Very nice sectors.
other areas that predate that 7.5 foot, and we've had extensive conversation with Mr. Cantrell and engineering folks about this, because we want to make sure that we're not creating problems here. But in some of those neighborhoods that have alleys, that are alley loaded, it could benefit those areas, those property owners, to be able to pull that accessory structure all the way up to the alley. So the conversation this is a bigger conversation, and we will certainly bring this back to you, and this will be part of it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
And we'll
Mitchell.
name it the Pavlich provision.
Just part
Yeah,
of it.
all right.
I just want a little piece.
Any further information to be provided today? All in favor of
Mr. Chairman.
closing the meeting?
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman.
Oh, he started the throw. You can't stop it.
I'm sorry I have to catch you on this one. While Preston was presenting, something kept catching my attention on the minutes you just approved for last month's Planning Commission meeting.
Yes, sir.
On page 3 of those minutes, we all didn't catch this one, where it says a motion to approve the final subdivision plat, page 3
Yeah, y'all
of your
did. I
packet.
wasn't
Bolded
here
area,
at that
yes.
meeting, so I
Placing a
didn't read it.
$15,000 bond.
Yes, that bond was 153,000.
Whoops.
That bond was 153. There is a 3 that is missing, and that is significant.
That is significant.
See what happens when I skip a
So
meeting?
please, I recommend that the be,
This a little bit like this.
yes, I recommend that the minutes be
Amended.
amended
I need a
to
motion.
reflect that
So
153,000.
to make a
please.
motion to amend the amendments as
I wasn't here last month, I can't.
I made a motion to
Okay.
approve them, so I'll make a motion to amend
in
them.
my, okay, motion.
Did I do that?
Do what?
Did I make a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, you did.
I'll amend that motion
And
to add the
my-
3.
Thank you.
And the seconder will second it,
Okay.
whoever he was. Correct? Or she. She, that's generic.
And I apologize. That would
No.
be my error, so
All in favor for amending the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. All in favor of closing the meeting? Aye.
The next time you think